You guys ready to play some fact or fiction?
Let's do it.
Okay. So came up with some on the defense. I will say it was a little easier with the offense with some of the stats and everything. But we will get into a few of these here. Chris will start on this one. Anthony will start. We'll go that way, then Anthony, then me, and then we will switch up who starts the next one. Fact or fiction? Michigan will once again hold opponents to less than 100 rushing yards per game in 2023. For context, they were at 97.9 last year. That ranks 7th in the country. Only 6 of Michigan's 14 opponents gained more than 90 yards on the ground. And the most was TCU with 263, but no one else was really much higher than 150. Don't have the exact number in front of me. So fact or fiction?
I'm going fact. I think this defensive line is going to be better even without Mozzie Smith. I think Mason Graham's going to take a huge leap. I think Kenneth Grant is going to come into his own. I think they've got the depth. I think Chris Jenkins is stronger and bigger. We know he is because we asked him. I always ask Clay to ask him what his weight is wherever we are. So, and he always obliges, although he did tell me in Cleveland up to 297 on his way to 305 or 310. So I love the defensive line. I think Junior Colson's going to be better. I think that the linebackers will be better as a whole because they have more depth. So to me, with the edges like Jalen Harrell coming back, who's outstanding in that role, Braden McGregor getting better and better. I think Derek Moore's going to have a big year. Yeah, I like him to be even less than that this year.
I will also say fact for all of the reasons that Chris has listed already. I think that the defensive line is deeper. I think that there is something that's been striking to me when we talk to guys in the spring and also some of these camps that we've hit is there's an edge about these guys that they didn't do a better job stopping the run, and the communication between the edge guys and the defensive tackles wasn't where they wanted it to be, and it seems like that's been. I won't say fully addressed, but it's in the process of being addressed. And, you have guys, I think, on this defensive front that can play 2 or 3 positions. Mason Graham's probably a guy that could play Chris Jenkins' role. And then maybe in certain, formations, he holds down the fort at the nose and does some other things. And I think there are a few guys in that mold on the defensive line. So I think that, not that it was a concern last year. I think it's even more of an emphasis for those guys in the trenches. And I think that they ultimately will do a better job of stopping the run. And I think they will improve on those numbers from last year.
That was really interesting what Mason Graham said about that kind of disconnect between the D tackles and the edges. And they did say that they're meeting more together, all with Mike Elston, as opposed to the edges going with Dylan Roney, the grad assistant there. So, maybe that could fix some things. I'm actually going to go with fiction on this one, just over 100 yards. I just think that was a pretty incredible number there. And I think that just with Mozzie Smith being gone and having to replace him, maybe they take a slight dip by a few yards, but I wouldn't push it much past 105 or anything like that. I just think it's still a little bit of a question mark at the nose tackle spot, and that's a really important spot in this defense. But I think they're going to be really good against the run again as well. Probably ranked still top 10, top 15 there. This one, perhaps a little bit easier. Fact or fiction? Someone other than Will Johnson will lead Michigan in interceptions this season. Anthony.
I am going to go fact on that one. And if anyone saw, just as well, this will be posted later on, but I just had a bold predictions for every position group go live for the defensive side of the ball on Thursday afternoon. And my bold prediction was that Rod Moore will be the guy that leads the team in interceptions. I think when you look at a player like Rod Moore, nobody on that defense watches as much film as he does. And when you do that, and when you have the skill set that he does, you find yourself in position to make plays. He has a nose for the football. He's the type of guy that finds himself in the right place at the right time because he is so prepared. So again, he led the team in interceptions last year, so it's not the boldest prediction in the world. I think that Will Johnson, if healthy, is going to be up there as well. But I think that I'm saying fact. It will be someone other than Will Johnson, and it will be Rod Moore and I'll even put a number on it. I'll say Rod Moore has 6 picks this upcoming fall.
Wow.
You know what? I'm going to quote James Carville in Old School with my rebuttal, and I say we have no rebuttal. That was perfect. So I agree 100%. So Anthony knows what I'm talking about. Clayton probably didn't see the movie, but you know what? Yeah, well, there you have it. So I agree with you. I think Rod Moore is going to lead this team in interceptions. I think Will Johnson's going to be fantastic. I will say this. I don't think they're going to throw the ball at him enough for him to lead the team in interceptions because he's that guy. They're going to try to pick on other people, and he's going to be a lockdown cornerback. So I love Rod Moore. As everybody knows, I think he is one of the better safeties that they've had in a few decades, frankly, in terms of his preparation and his nose for the football, as Anthony said. So I agree with everything you said, Anthony, with the exception that maybe 6 is maybe a little too high. But, I could see 4 or 5 for sure, and that would lead the team.
Okay. I think that's really valid. And I think Rod Moore is going to be up there again. I got fact, though, with Will Johnson. I know he may not get thrown at as much, which is going to be big, especially if that other corner spot is a weakness or if it's just average or something like that. But I'm going to go with Will Johnson. I just think just his talent level and just how prepared he's going to be as well is going to factor into it. But Rod Moore last year with 4 interceptions was the most by a Michigan player since Channing Stribling in 2016. And when you think of 2016, so this lends credence to your guys' point, Jordan Lewis was Michigan's lockdown corner. But Channing Stribling was on the other side there, maybe got thrown at a little bit more and got the interception. So I think I could see it going either way, but I'm going to bet on Will Johnson. Yes, I will go first here. But last year, Michigan held its non-conference opponents, Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn, to 17 total points. Fact or fiction, Michigan will hold East Carolina, UNLV, and Bowling Green to 17 or less this season. It's an equally, or maybe not equally, but close to as weak of a non-conference slate. But I'm going to go fiction. I'll say somewhere in the 20s. It's going to come down probably to garbage time. It did even last year for those 17 points. If you remember, Hawaii's touchdown, it was actually on Will Johnson, but that was pretty late in the game, I think in the fourth quarter. So it's going to come down to that. But I'm going to go with I think that was pretty impressive. And it included a shutout against UConn. So I'm going to go with fiction that it'll be more than 17.
I agree, and I think it'll be like they'll average a touchdown against a game or something like that. It's hard.
Yeah,
it takes one fluke play, right, for somebody to score, and to ask them to hold them to 17 again, that'd be pretty tough. So, especially when the offense is going to be putting up huge points, and like you said, Clay, in the fourth quarter, even though Michigan's got more depth this year, and the second team and third team defenses will be more than adequate against these teams, I think you'll see them give up a little bit more. So I'm with you.
I also think that they will give up a little bit more, and hopefully it's on during the Peacock game, the one that most of the nation probably won't even tune into, because then it just will never happen,
right.
If there's no record of it. So, it's going to be, there was and I'm not saying that they won't come out with the same fire they did last year, but there was a little extra. We've talked about this before. There was a little extra juice in that non-conference slate last year, whether it was due to the quarterback battle or those edge guys that were, had a fire under their butt because they wanted to prove that they'd be fine without Aiden. I feel like there are aspects of this team where we're going to see them play the long game a little bit more this year. So I wouldn't be surprised to see reserves in maybe even a little earlier than, if those games are going similarly, maybe even earlier than we did in some of those games last year. But we'll see what happens. It's so tough to do what they did. But, when you have a non-conference slate that's light, that's going to be what you're expected to do too.
Yep, for sure. Back to CB to start this one off, but sticking with a similar note, but this time the entire season, only 2 regular season opponents scored 20 or more points against Michigan last season, Maryland and Ohio State, which is still hard to believe. Purdue also did in TCU, both games in the postseason. So fact or fiction, the Wolverines will only give up 20 or more points to 3 or fewer opponents this season.
3 or fewer.
Yep. Last year was 2.
Yeah, that's a tough one, man. I think Ohio State will get there. I think Penn State could certainly get there at home. And then it's only one. And then it's only one more. And again, so I'm going to say 3 is the number. Actually, I don't know what does that make it? Fact or fiction? So. Yeah,
that would make it fact.
Yeah. So, yes, I'll go with 3. I think this defense is going to be fantastic. I think that and here's another thing to take into consideration when you think about the rushing totals. I think the pass rush is going to be better this year. I do. I think guys like Derek Moore, I think Braden McGregor is going to take a step forward, and that's going to factor into those yardage totals. I meant to say that. So I'm going to go with fact. I think it's going to be 3. I think Ohio State, Penn State, and one other. Maybe it's Maryland, although they've had pretty good success against Maryland on the road, even with their good skill position players and solid quarterback play.
Clay, just really quick, can you repeat the wording of the prompt for me?
Yep. Fact or fiction, the Wolverines will only give up 20 or more points to 3 or fewer regular season opponents this season.
Ooh, 20 or more. I'm gonna go fiction. They're gonna find themselves in a couple of those. Again, the Nebraska game is one that keeps coming up. Maryland likes to throw the ball around. Rutgers has weirdly played Michigan really tough recently. Not that they have some high-powered offense, but yeah, it's there were times last year where it felt clinical that Michigan was kind of skating through the season. I think this team is better, but I don't think it's going to be quite as easy because you're going to get everyone's best shot every week. So I will say fiction on that one.
Okay, I'm going to go fact with Chris here, but I do agree that it will be 3 instead of 2. And part of that is because you play more road games this year, and
right.
You just never know. Some of the scores are like 17 or something like that, and even I think one of the non-conference teams got into 10. I don't think they're going to get to 20, but I just think that that was pretty special what they did last season, shutting some of those teams down. And the Big Ten was pretty light on good offenses last year, and maybe we'll see some improved ones, although they don't have the toughest schedule with the crossover games. But Anthony, you will start on this one. Fact or fiction, this season, Junior Colson will become Michigan's first player since Jarrett Irons in 1994, 95, and 96 to have multiple 100-plus tackle seasons. He was just over that landmark at 101 last season. So fact or fiction, Junior Colson will put up 100 or more tackles again this year.
Whew. Oh, that's tough because they're deeper there, and I think they're going to rotate a little more. But he's just so good at cleaning stuff up. Getting to once things get to that second level, they don't go much faster usually, or much further past, I should say, Junior Colson. So I'll say fact on that one. I'd feel a little more comfortable if it was over the next 2 years. Will he record another 100 tackle season? But maybe no. Who knows? This might be his last year. You just don't know what'll happen. So I'll say fact. Junior Colson, I think his best football is still very much ahead of him. Not that he had a sophomore slump, but I think he was tired out there at times, and they're gonna help him out with that this year. So I say fact.
I agree with that. And I think he's going to have a huge year. I think with Chris Partridge there, coaching him, Jesse Minter, I think Junior Colson this could be his last year. I think he's going to be a pro and a very good one. Those measurables and the way he moves at that size is unique. So I think he's going to have a huge year. I think he will be an all Big Ten first team player this year, and excited to see him in there. So they are going to be deeper this year, so he won't have to play as much. I think you're going to see Ernest Hausman, Nebraska transfer, play some more in there. Mike Barrett, obviously coming back, the Buckeye Killer, as we like to call him. So Jimmy Rolder, I think, is going to be bigger, stronger this year and have a role too. So I'm with you, Anthony.
Yeah, I'm with you guys too. I think he is going to get that. If you look at his 7.2, I think it is tackles per game. There's still some room for improvement there in terms of where that ranked, even in the Big Ten. And I think he's going to be one of the best linebackers in the Big Ten. So I think he's going to surpass that. I also think they're going to play an extra game. I think Michigan's going to be playing in the national championship game, so that has to factor in to my answer here as well. Last one, and it's my turn to start it. So fact or fiction, Michigan's sack leader will have 8 or more sacks this season. Last year, Mike Morris led the team with 7.5. The year before, Aiden Hutchinson obviously set the single season program record with 14. David Ojabo also had, I think, 10 or 11. I think it was 11 because they combined for 25. But I'm going to go with fiction. I think it's going to be a little bit similar to last season, a little bit more spread out. I think if Mike Moe stays healthy, though, he does get over that last year. So that's something to consider. as well. But it's kind of, frankly, one of my bigger concerns about this team is there going to be a guy that, commands staying on the field the entire game at the edge spot? You can piece it together with the rotation, but I'd feel better about a guy out there the entire game, able to set up moves and things like that. So that's one of my concerns, and that's why I'll go with basically the under on 8.
The only thing I disagree with there is you look at a guy like David Ojabo, who was kind of a specialist in that respect. I don't have any problem bringing on a guy on third and long and bringing him in and saying, hey, go get the quarterback. Maybe
Sure.
Josiah Stewart's that guy. Maybe Derek Moore's that guy this year. So, but I agree with you. I think you're going to have a bunch of guys in that 6-7 area.
Right.
Maybe a Derek Moore, Stewart. I think Braden McGregor will be there, could be there. So, but is it going to be one guy? No. So, and I'm okay with that, because that means that you've got several good options. So going to be fascinating to see if the interior rush is better. They keep talking about it, and none of those guys are going to get up that high. That's just not what they're supposed to do. I think Chris Jenkins will have quite a few, and I think he'll be fine. But it's those edge guys, and I think you'll have a bunch of guys that are in that Mike Morris category this year.
Yeah, I'm with Fiction on that as well. I'm not there yet in terms of thinking there's a guy that's, I don't know if there is a guy that can. I mean, I know that Jalen Harrell can play all 3 downs, but he's not really your purest, pass rusher. He does a lot of the other things really well. So I'll say Fiction again. I feel like there's a cluster of guys that I think will do quite a bit. I think it's going to be a group effort. But yeah, 8 is. I don't want to say it's a big number, but it's just. I don't know that guy is there yet, though there is the potential for it. So we'll see.
For sure. And going off your point, CB, is if Josiah Stewart, let's say he is that guy, he plays kind of like a Josh Uche role or a David Ojabo role where, especially with Uche, looking back, he probably should have gotten more snaps. But he led the team in sacks, I think, in both 18 and 19 with 7 and then 7.5. So he'd be under that, but he was a fantastic rusher, and that was a really good pass rush unit. Only played 9 games in 2018, though, so probably could have passed that with more playing time or staying healthy or whatever it was. I can't remember. But it will be interesting to see